This is a message to all my supporters of this podcast. I'm introducing a new supporters program. You can contribute a small amount as a one-off payment to show your love for this podcast. Thank you in advance for all your contributions. I just wanted to let you know before we start the podcast that I am doing an online podcast course, how to be able to create, get your guests, scale it and monetize it. So please do go to abmpodcastcourse.co.uk and go into the contact us bit. I'm looking for new people to be able to be a podcast creator and really to be able to develop their skills and knowledge into a podcast. So as I said, go to abmpodcastcourse.co.uk and sign up. Thanks. This is the Absolute Business Mindset podcast, created and hosted by Mark Hayward. This podcast will help and support you with new ideas about business. These are my thoughts, ideas, and comments. Today we have Derick Van Ness, who is a wealth strategist. Hello, Derick. How are you?
I'm fantastic, Mark. Happy to be here.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm so glad you could join us. So I've been doing quite a bit of research on you about your position on lots of different things, for example, real estate, the stock market, recession. So we're going to go deep into those areas today, but we're going to go all the way back to your degrees. So you did a business administration degree at Southern Utah University. So why did you decide on business administration?
Well, honestly, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life, but what I did know, Mark, is everything is a business, right? And I figured if I know business, if I understand how business works, because I did know that I wanted to be in business for myself in some way. My father was a ceramic tile contractor. So he ran his own small business. He had some employees. So I kind of got to see the freedom and the ups and downs that came with that. But I just always knew I wanted that. So the degree was really like, here's a stepping stone to give me the foundation to be able to do what I want to do with my life. Even if I'm not sure what it is, I've created a foundation that I can build a lot of different things on. So that was really the thought behind it, is this is something that's going to be useful no matter where I go.
And so were you heavily influenced by your father and the way that he was not an employee? Was that an inspiration for you?
Yeah, I don't know if inspiration is the right word, but I definitely, I think most people look up to their father, or most kids do, right? Like he's kind of a hero. And he did well financially, and he had to innovate and make his own way. And, we certainly had some hard times in the 80s in the United States when construction was really down, especially in our market. So I kind of got to see him do a lot of these. And what I really liked was he always had the ability to come pick us up from school, or if we needed something, he could do it. Or I just loved the idea that if he needed to make more money, he could go do that. And the I don't know if it's the freedom or the ability to create more if you needed to, or step on the gas. I really liked that. So I think I just always saw myself as someone who could find my own way in the world and have a little bit more control over my own life. I don't know why, but the idea of working under someone, unless you're really working with the team you love, it was just scary to me, the constriction of it when I was younger. And that might just be because he had the freedom of it, because quite frankly, being an entrepreneur certainly has its downside, especially in the first couple of years. It's a lot of sacrifice. There's no safety net. It can be really scary, which is what also makes it really exciting. But yeah, you're really sink or swim on your own when you're out there in that world.
So I am literally, I've handed my notice in from a corporate job that I've been in corporate for about 14, 15 years.
Oh, wow.
So I'm just starting my entrepreneurial journey, and I think that's a really good way of describing it. It's equally as exciting as it is scary, and I think that pretty much sums it up, because I'm sort of winding down at the moment and we're trying to pick up other things as I go. And I've got a plan. It's all planned out, but as you say, that sort of no safety net of having a sort of job and being an employee of someone can be scary for people. So let's just delve a little bit further deeper into that. So when you through your entrepreneurial journey, have you felt that we're going to talk about recessions and about that a little bit later, but have you felt that there is a sort of cycle that businesses go through? Is that the same for different types of businesses, or do you feel that we're sort of directed by where the country's recessions and wealth creation is based?
Yeah, so the answer is yes and no, right? Some businesses are definitely impacted based on what's going on with the recessions or the expansions economically, right? If you're in like the grocery store business, it's fine, right? It's kind of the same. People have to continue to eat, or if you sell car insurance or oil changes or those kinds of things, then those types of businesses are not as adversely affected versus businesses that are like luxury goods or things that are wants but not needs. A lot of the wants get cut out during the tough times, right? And then there's businesses that sell hope, right? And those businesses that sell hope oftentimes do a little better during the recession, because people are like in a tough spot, like education type of programs or universities do really well in downturns because everyone says, okay, it's not working. Let's do a reset. Let me go back and get a new skill set. Let me get educated. Let me upgrade my marketability in the marketplace. So yeah, they are all affected in different ways, but each business is quite different. And even within certain industries, if you're in real estate, if you work in markets like Palm Springs, California, it's a vacation market, right? People go there to go to spas and hang out. Those in an upturn, those have a tendency to do really, really well because a lot more people are traveling and vacation services are in demand. But in a recession, those are the first places that go for second homes or for resort properties, or those kinds of things have a tendency to get hit the hardest because people will get rid of those long before they get rid of their primary residence, right? So it really is all over the board, but I think it's important to understand how your industry works within that whole cycle, right? Where are the strong times? And even I would say for a lot of businesses, times of year, like real estate is much slower in the US in the winter than it is in the summer, right? All the kids are out of school, weather's better, people are looking to move around and all of that. There are certain months out of the year that are better or worse for certain services. So I think understanding the cycles of your particular industry and your particular business is very important so that you can sort of save up your nuts for winter and make sure you get through the winter to get back to the spring and summer. And when it's spring and summer, you got to plant all the seeds you can and harvest as much as you possibly can, knowing that, at some point that might change a little bit.
I totally agree. And I think one of the interesting points I think for me through COVID has been self-education and sort of that education piece that, and I think it's been slightly different because I think people have wanted to self-educate rather than go through universities. Obviously, universities have suffered. Well, in the UK, have definitely suffered with COVID, and they've just started again, and it's really tricky for students to manage that. But I think because Zoom calls are now a commonplace, that place for self-education, whether it's in real estate or money management or financial matters, I think it's been a bit of a differentiator in this recession.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Hi, I'm Alex, the host of X Health Show, Meet the Future of Healthcare. Think X-Men, that's X Health, actual superheroes behind programming living cells to cure cancer once and for all. Tech that detects preterm delivery in seconds, brain-computer interface, or apps that employ AI to match you, your disease, with the best treatment. X Health Show brings to you visionaries who push the boundaries of healthcare from Switzerland, the heart of Europe, and the most innovative country in the world. Let me introduce you to their startups. Head to X Health Show, Meet the Future of Healthcare. Happy to greet you there.
I totally agree. I think it was, already happening and had been for the last 5 or 10 years, a lot of online education, because I've spent tens or I don't know, hundreds of thousands of dollars on a lot of that over the years. But it's really been accelerated because people have been forced to get education that way. And all of a sudden they're like, wow, there's this whole new world out there. Like there's more to YouTube than cat videos, right? Or sports videos or whatever people are into. They're like, oh, wow. Because if you look at my feed, there's a couple different interests, but like there's a ton of personal development and TED Talks and all that kind of stuff. And once you start to realize it's out there, I mean, you can dial that stuff up at any time. And then, of course, a lot of those lead to paid courses where you're like, oh, wow, I really love the way that this person approaches things. I want to work with them. I want to dig deeper. And obviously, if it's something that is super valuable, a lot of times there's a cost associated with it.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I did a short podcast a little while ago about the value of YouTube as an education piece rather than, as you said, like frowning cats or sports or whatever. So I think it's a really powerful piece that sometimes people are not aware of or not paying attention to. But yeah, the power of YouTube and podcasts is immense. Right, we've got a bit of a detour. Let's come back to finishing your degree. Mm-hmm. What was your first role? Did you have a job after that? I struggled to find what the first thing was that you did after your degree.
It wasn't super glamorous, the first one or two. So I came out of school, and the thing I knew about wanting to create success in my financial life, I'd read a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. A lot of people have read that by Robert Kiyosaki. And one of the things he says in there is if you're going to be in business for yourself, you need to learn how to sell. Yeah. And I was scared to death of selling because I didn't want to be this manipulative, silver-tongued kind of person. And so I thought, you know what? I need to take the toughest sales job I can find to just like look this thing right in the mouth and just go right down its throat. Otherwise, I'm going to run from it my whole career. Mm. So I took a job selling door to door, business to business, door to door. And I was just selling these coupons, and they're really funny. They're promotional coupons for like auto shops. And it was just four oil changes for $20. And so we would go into businesses and tell people, hey, you own a car, don't you? Of course, right? Kind of a loaded question. And then just tell them we can get you, we're from the shop down the street. We can get you 4 oil changes for $20. It's kind of a promotional offer. And every time you come in, we'll do a full review of your car and all this stuff, which of course for the auto shop dug up a bunch of more things that someone might need or additional services. So they were kind of using the oil change as a loss leader. Yeah. But it really got me. I only did it for 3 or 4 months, but I had to sell 15 or 20 of these a day to kind of hit my numbers. Yeah. And so I had to knock 100, 150 doors a day. And that just got me really comfortable with being uncomfortable because I was doing these things in Los Angeles, like in Compton and in tough areas sometimes where you walk in and everything's like thick plexiglass, bulletproof. And you're like, should I really be here? I don't know. But it thickened my skin, and a lot of people didn't speak English. And so, trying to sell something to somebody in English as their second language was at times very difficult. And I got to interact with Los Angeles and San Francisco where I was doing this. They're very diverse places and a lot of immigrants. So I got to meet a lot of people from all over the world and see the different cultural approaches to negotiations and how they talk to you. And it was quite an education for those first 4 or 5 months there. The problem was, even though I was doing pretty well, I just, living in either of those cities is not cheap. I just couldn't make enough money. So I had to get a better sales job, but it was a really good education of just like right in somebody's face to face, getting really comfortable with talking to them and practicing overcoming objections, and a lot of skills that I think are just super, super important. And once a maxim I love is confidence comes from doing. So once you just do that 100 times a day, every single day for your survival, you get really comfortable with people. And that was really helpful.
I think it's so important. And as an entrepreneur, I think you need to be able to sell because equally, I've had a conversation with someone today where I said about, corporate roles. I was chatting to someone who still has a corporate role. And I said, you're not going to like this because British people don't like the term sales. I said, you need to sell yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's so important in business that whether you're an entrepreneur or in a corporate role, you've got to be able to sell, whether it's your product or service or yourself. You've got to be comfortable talking about these subjects and thinking about strategies to influence or to persuade people. Do you have any thoughts about sales because it sounds like you got a lot from it very quickly?
Well, I certainly had other sales jobs. So since then, I wrote a book that's on Amazon on salesmanship, and it's specifically on ethical salesmanship because that was the big thing, right? People think sales is a dirty word, and I think it used to be much more manipulation and all of that. I think with today's world, with the internet and everything, you really have to be transparent with people, and you really have to keep the client's best interest in mind. And when I used to read these sales books or take courses, they always said, "Oh, you have to sell something you believe in." And I thought, like, I worked for a couple of these companies and I was selling something that was okay, but I don't know if I would use the word believed in it, right? But what I found is to be super effective, you really do need to believe you're doing the right thing for the client. It doesn't mean that your product has to be better than everything in every situation, but you need to know that the person's going to be better for having done business with you. And I think if you really believe that, then you can become an advocate. You're not trying to force them to do something that's not the right thing or manipulate them. You're really on their side of the table and you're helping them go through solutions. And my book talks about breaking it up into information gathering and then leading questions. So the information gathering is, what do they need? What are their goals? What are their fears? What are they trying to accomplish? And then if you can solve that, then you can walk them down the road so that they can see how your product or service can really work for that. And I find that to be a really effective structure. And it's super ethical because you're like, okay, now I know what they want. I know we can deliver it. Now I just have to make sure that they understand why we're a good choice for that.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful message. I want to move on to real estate. So real estate for you and property we've got in the UK, and there seems to be a thread throughout the whole of your journey of real estate. So you had a role at Freedom House Buyers for 6 years, and then later on in your own business, you've had an impact on educating on real estate. Why did you pick real estate as a subject for your expertise?
Yeah, I kind of fell into it. So I got interested in real estate before like flipping houses was this big sensation, right? To me, it was like buy an ugly house, fix it up, and resell it for more. And the reason I did that was in between the coupon selling business and the real estate business, I was on the phone and I was doing 200 cold calls a day. We were selling equipment financing and just grinding it out under the lights there, the fluorescent lights just drove me crazy. I felt like a caged animal. I learned a lot, but it was really hard on me emotionally and mentally. So when I went in, so the idea of like, hey, I can just buy a house, fix it up while I live in it, resell it, make $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 and do that 3 times a year and make more money than I am grinding this out every day was really appealing. And I had a construction background because of my father, right? So I knew the construction wasn't a mystery to me. I knew I could do a lot of it myself if I wanted to. So I just started doing that thinking, I'll do 2 or 3 of these a year until I figure out what I want to do. And then I very quickly invested in some education that taught me you can do 20 of these a year. You can do 30 of these a year. And I was like, whoa, like this could be really cool. I could make a lot of money. I could, and I liked the idea of taking something ugly and making it pretty. So I kind of fell into it. It wasn't like as big a thing back then. And so I just started off doing 1, 2, 3, and all of a sudden found myself doing 15 a year, 25 a year. And I think in our biggest year, we maybe did 30, 35 houses. So I got really into it for the next 7 or 8 years. So I just developed a big expertise. And I really feel like the thing about real estate is it just gets better over time. I just think it's an excellent investment for anybody. Now, you can certainly do real estate wrong and it can kick your butt because it's a leveraged investment, right? Meaning you use a small amount of money to control a large asset. Well, leverage works both ways, as I discovered in 2008. But when it's going up, you can see massive ROI on your money. Yeah. When it's going down, it can go the other way. It just allows you to play a much bigger game without having to have hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. So I loved that. I love inflation's a big conversation right now with the US with all the stimulus money going out. And I'm sure some of that's going to trickle down to the rest of the world because, we're all so tied together these days, that real estate adjusts for inflation. If people have more dollars, then they're willing to pay more for houses, right? But what's interesting is if you have a mortgage, your mortgage doesn't change. So if your mortgage is $2,000 a month, and then we go through all this inflation over the next 10 years, that $2,000 a month is more like $1,000 a month. Mm-hmm. It's still $2,000, but money comes so much more easily. There's so many more dollars that the actual cost goes down over time. And that's extremely powerful, right? To be able to live in an asset that's going up in value while your payment is essentially going down in value. That creates a really nice spread for the long term. So seeing all that in real estate just convinced me and has convinced me that it's one of the most powerful vehicles you can use. It's got its downsides because it's not hands off like people want to say. It's passive. It's passive until something breaks or something needs to be fixed, right? But it's real people living in a real asset that wears out and has problems. So, it has its trade-offs, but over the years, I've become convinced that it's such a powerful wealth building tool that it does have a way of weaving into a lot of what I teach.
Yeah. So in the last about 9 months, I've started investing in properties, and it's been going really well. And then, as you say, there was a cost. Something broke. Boiler broke. Had to fix it. Luckily, I was sensible enough to leave a fund for these sorts of things, and it wasn't a massive problem. But you're absolutely right. I think as an asset value, I've done research and I found where I'm investing, the housing prices doubled in 10 years in 10 years ago. And I looked again the 10 years before that, and it actually increased even more than double. And so I think it's a really powerful asset class. Do you still own properties?
I unloaded a bunch of mine about 2 years ago because I thought we were really at the top of the market here in the U.S. Right. And I have a little bit of emotional scar damage because in 2008, I was in an accident and the market turned and I had 18 properties and it just clobbered me and I kind of lost everything. So because of that, I thought, you know what? I'm at the top of the market. I think I want to unload these, cash out, and then continue to do what I'm doing with wealth strategy. So I unloaded them, and it kind of worked out to be good because I moved across the country about a year later to the East Coast, over to the Washington, D.C. area for something related to my girlfriend's job. And then that didn't end up working out. So we moved back across the country. And so having properties across the country it's a little tougher. And so it was kind of nice to not be weighed down by that. But the market has continued to rise. So probably would have been good to hang on to them. I just believe that it's better to be out a little bit early than late. And I was trying to get liquid.
Yeah, I totally understand that. My strategy is a long-term strategy. So mine is to get rental as it is termed a passive income, but equally I totally understand what you mean. It's not all passive.
Yeah, when it works, it's passive.
Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting because there's always that option to sell and to liquidate and put into other areas. So I think there's a lot of flexibility that real estate properties give you, which sometimes other types of assets don't. So I would agree with that. Right, we're going to take a step out of your journey. I'm going to ask you, what do you have a morning routine?
I do. So, and this has changed from place to place where I've lived in different sorts of things. But yeah, I think it's really important for me to exercise in the morning. We've played with different exercise things, like I was a really big fan of F45 for a while. And then we went into the COVID shutdown. Yeah, it's an Australian company, and it's a functional 45-minute workout. It's kind of a cross between like CrossFit and, I don't know if you have Orange Theory.
No, a little more training, high intensity interval training is massive in the UK at the moment.
Yeah, it's kind of in that vein. And then they have certain days that are sort of more weight oriented, strength oriented, and other days that are more cardio focused. But I was doing that for a long time, would get up at, 6:30 every day, go to that. And then I like to read for 20, 30 minutes if I can. And then I do a lot of meditation. I've recently moved meditation from my morning routine. A lot of times I'll do it after lunch.
Okay.
It kind of, the morning a lot of times for me is my most productive time. So it's nice to like go from reading and I'm inspired and, had a cup of coffee and just like write and create and do all of that in the morning. And then I do a couple of appointments with clients, have lunch, and then it's nice to have a good reset for me. So I find that meditation after lunch works really well for me. And I never miss it that way because I have lunch every day, right? Like my stomach makes sure I do that. So that's become a really good routine. But I typically was doing meditation in the morning until I'd say the last couple of months here. I've been doing after lunch and kind of playing with that. And it really helps to reset my energy, recharge me for the second half of the day. So that's a routine that I stick with. And I don't know, I feel great because even if the day goes terribly, I worked out, I took care of myself, I grew every day, new ideas. It really helps, especially when you're creating content as much as we are these days.
It's really interesting you say that, how you find having structure early on in your day gives you like the ability to have structure for the rest of your day. Do you have, one of the things I'm toying with when I leave my job is have days for certain tasks. So would you have a Monday as a content creation day mixed in with if you've got client calls and things like that? Do you ever break your days into specific areas? Absolutely,
100%. For me, Thursday is a content creation day. I don't do any appointments unless it's a real emergency. So that day when I wake up, I know I can create content, I can write, I can do things, I can film my videos, and do all the peripheral stuff that needs to be done in that world. So that's definitely what Thursdays are for me. I also have Monday mornings blocked out for team meetings and getting the week going. And, I've got my people who work with me to do my marketing and to do my, run my Facebook group. We have a group called the Business Owner Success Lab, where we do trainings every week and try and offer value on a daily basis for people. And I have some people who help run that group. So we meet every Monday morning. So I do have certain things. And then if I know that I've got a big project, I will block out time, a lot of times toward the end of the day for me, where I don't have to think about everything else. I can just let it all go. And if I have to work into the evenings a little bit, I can do that. But that way I know I can get a workbook done or write some chapters or whatever I'm focused on. Yeah. But Thursdays for me for sure are 100% content creation. It really helps because trying to stick it in between meetings and stuff is really hard.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Right, let's go straight into Big Life Financial. So you'd had some roles, some sales roles. You'd had some real estate, and I know that you worked with dentists and chiropractors as well, helping them financially. So what made you start Big Life Financial?
Yeah, so when the market crashed in 2008, I went to work for a friend of mine, Garrett Gunderson's his name, for his company Wealth Factory as a financial coach. And I started working with people, and we did this whole comprehensive thing, right? Taking people through all their insurances and investments and their savings and their budget and their corporate entity structuring and estate planning and the whole thing. And I really enjoyed that because I got to see people's whole financial picture. And then we also underpin that with something called soul purpose, which was really aligning everything you do in your life with what you want to create, with your soul purpose, with why you're here as a human being. And that was kind of the inspiration for where Big Life Financial came from. Is, it's not about money, it's about living a big life, but money is a big part of that. The reason I left Wealth Factory is essentially there was, I wanted to be able to do my own thing, and there was kind of a ceiling on it over there. They were very good to me. I learned a ton of things, but eventually it was like, hey, I can only make so much as an employee, even though I was independent contractor and kind of got to run my own show. There was a ceiling on it. And so I left that. I actually went back into real estate because I saw that we were in the market cycle moving up. This was 2014, 15, 16. And then when we got to like 17, I was like, we might be at the top. Let me jump out of this and get back into it. Because what I also realized is, although real estate's a great vehicle, I love working with people. I don't necessarily love working with houses as much, right? Like the fulfillment wasn't the same after having worked with so many business owners and helping them and them saying, wow, you changed my life, or I see things so different, or I sleep better at night, or my relationship's better. Houses just don't tell you that, right? You fix them up, they don't send you a thank you note. So I decided I wanted to work with people. And when I thought we were close to the market, I thought, this is the direction I'm going to go. And now we're bringing real estate back in because I really feel like it's going to be a big part of where the opportunities are for the next couple of years with some of the turbulence that we're likely to see in the economy.
Absolutely. How do you assess your client or customers' needs for their financial strategy? So there's various different areas which you sort of help people on. How do you do that assessment? Is there a particular technique for it?
I don't know if there's a technique, but I have something I teach called the Stairway to Wealth, and also something called the Wealth Hierarchy. They kind of work hand in hand with each other, but really we're just looking at there's a logical order in which I think you should build wealth. And so I kind of find out where they're at on that stairway so that we can help them to put the next couple of things in place. And the reason that that's so important is, like, a lot of people try to skip steps, right? Like, a lot of people want to go out and they want to do investments without savings. And like you just said, Mark, if you don't have savings and then your investment goes wrong, you could lose the whole investment, or it could get really costly and cost you more than it needs to. So I kind of feel like the first thing you need to do is you really need to focus on your primary career or business. I think people think they're going to get wealthy putting their money into Wall Street, but if you can only put $10 a month in there because you're not making very much, that's not going to work, right? So you really need to get your primary income. Like, that's the engine that drives the whole thing. Yeah. Really get that going. And I think for young people, especially in the early years, it's all about skills acquisition. Take jobs that will teach you to get the next job or to start your own thing, but really to acquire the skills to be good at what you want to be good at. And then once you get good at that, then you can focus on savings, you can focus on debt pay down. And then once you get those two kind of knocked out, and when I say debt pay down, I mean bad debt. Like, mortgage debt isn't expensive, right? It's super cheap. But anything that's maybe, at least here in the US, over 7%, I would consider to be like expensive debt, and it's probably worth paying it off, because when you pay off a 15% credit card, that's a guaranteed 15% rate of return with zero risk. Yeah. Right. So paying that off and then learning how to save into these vehicles that grow and compound over time, and leverage that stuff.
Yeah, no, this is a later question, but I'm going to bring it in now because it's an interesting point. So how do you automate your savings? Or what's the best method to do that? Because there's a guy called, I'm sure you've heard of him, Ramit Sethi, I think.
Ramit Sethi, yeah. I will teach you to be rich.
Yeah, exactly. And I listened to the book and it was fascinating, and it was all about making parts of your income and then putting that into saving straight away. Is that a similar technique that you use, or how do you automate your savings?
Yeah, so depending on where someone's at, I absolutely think we want to structure our life with automation as much as we can, to the point where if you don't make any changes, the things that align with what you want to create in your life happen, right? So automating that morning routine as much as possible. Like with F45, I would go in and register for all my classes for the week in advance. And if you don't show up, they start getting on your case and saying, hey, we're going to boot your membership, or you're not going to be able to get into classes. So I would commit myself. So that was like almost like automation. With savings, there's a couple of simple things. One is, if you get paid like every 2 weeks or on the 1st and the 15th or whatever, you can set up an automatic draft into a savings account out of your checking account. So it hits your checking account today, and tomorrow there's an automatic draft for a preset amount, right? Usually I recommend people save 10 to 20% of their income right off the top. Most people won't even miss 10%. 20% is a little bit more, but like, it'll get you where you want to go much faster. And that's really where you want to end up. But obviously saving into a savings account isn't the best thing. We also use, and there's something similar in the UK, we use cash value life insurance. Specifically, I like whole life insurance because it shows up and it's like a bill every month, right? But they have you set the bill up on auto pay. And the way that we structure the insurance policies, because they can be very expensive and there's lots of fees if you do them wrong, we set them up to minimize the fees and maximize the amount of money that goes into cash. And so that money just automatically gets paid like a bill, but it goes into savings every single month. So it tricks your brain because paying the bills isn't optional, but a lot of people think savings is optional. And so by having a bill that comes and gets paid on auto draft, it automates that savings, and you can save a lot of money into insurance that way. And it's similar to how we have 401ks and IRAs and that type of thing in the US. It's just outside of your business.
And does that life insurance, so if you, does that get triggered, you're allowed to release the money when you're 65, or it's not life insurance as in if you pass away, it goes to your family? How does it work in the US?
Yeah, so it is life insurance. If you die, it pays off your family, but it's kind of like there's a savings account. It's not technically a savings account, but there's an account inside of the life insurance where the cash builds up, and the more cash you have in there, the bigger your death benefit is. So if you started with 500,000 and then you kept saving money into there, the amount 600, 700, it would go up over time. So it does function for that, but it also functions as a very high interest savings account, because in the US currently, most people are getting less than 1%. Most people, it's between 1/4 and 1/8% interest. Whereas in life insurance, many of these companies guarantee 10 times that as a guarantee. And then on top of that, we use companies that pay a dividend. And yeah. And so I don't know all the ins and outs, Mark, but I do know that there are companies in the UK that do these kind of cash value overfunded life insurance policies that are designed really for cash accumulation. They do if you die, it pays your family, but they're really a great place to store your cash. So much so that like many of the US banks, that's where they store a bunch of their tier one capital, which is like the money in the vault they have to keep. Most of them keep between 20 and 30% inside of life insurance policies because it's super safe. It's a guaranteed rate of return while the money's got to be liquid. And in these, you don't have to hang on till retirement. You can use this money. And we actually teach a way to create your own banking system with it, where the cash builds up in there. And then when you go to buy a car or a vehicle, you can use the cash, pay for the vehicle. And then we teach you how to pay yourself back, just like you were the bank. So you get that money back in there where it's going to earn that high interest. And in the US, it even has great tax advantages on that growth. So you're not tied to only using it for retirement. You can use it to grow your business. You can use it for real estate investing. And
you can withdraw, you can take money out of it as and when you like.
Yep. It takes like 3 to 7 days to get the money. So it's a bit like having an account with a bank that's on the other side of the country. You have to call them up and they'll mail you a check or they'll wire it into your account. So it's not like gas and groceries money, but it is very, very liquid.
That's fascinating. I will have a look into that. Tell me about your tax strategies. So tax is one of those questions where I've faced questions on it because this is where my corporate area is, and I've been faced questions like, well, tax is a moral issue, and then you have other people that say it's a way to contribute to society, and that's the method for it. It's not a moral issue. It's how best the strategy you can have on tax. I know it's a bit of a tricky subject, but what's your view on tax and the morality of it?
Well, so I come from a place, like you were saying, a place of contribution, right? And so I know that the more resources I can retain, the bigger impact I can have, the more people I can hire, the more people we can educate. So I feel like if I felt like the government was going to do a better job with my money than I would, perhaps I would feel differently. But my belief is you should pay the minimum legally that you can in taxes. Obviously, you got to pay your fair share, but there's too many people who overpay for the reasons you're talking about, and they're taking money out of their hands and they're putting it into, the government's hands. And I just don't always feel like the government does the best job with those dollars. Many of them are notoriously inefficient, and there are some departments that run much better than others, but I trust myself more than I trust them to go out and do things aligned with what I think should happen in the world, right? And so I try to support the things that I love and spend money on businesses and with people that I want to see continue to be successful. And the government might have a different view on that, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I prefer to retain control of as much of my money as I can.
Absolutely, fair enough. Right, we're going to take a step out of this conversation again. Do you have a coach or a mentor at the moment, or has it been important to your journey, coaches and mentors?
It has been extremely important. I just cut ties with a coach that I was working with 2 months ago. I am working with another coach right now on the marketing side of things, but like as far as, in marketing and scaling, and we'll get into that, I'm sure at some point here, but so I've always had coaches. I mean, there have been periods where I didn't, but most of the impactful periods of my life where I really saw hyper growth, I've always had coaches, and I've always invested in that. And there are different kinds, right? There's one-on-one coaching, there's small group coaching, there's masterminds. I happen to be very fortunate that a couple of my friends are uber successful. So we help each other in our different areas of expertise, and that's really nice. But yeah, having coaches is really critical because they will push you to do the things that you won't do on your own. I find for me, like even if your coach isn't great, just having to answer to someone and them saying, "Hey, Derick, did you do this thing you said you were going to do?" I like to look good. And I think most people have that wired in. We want to be liked. We want to, be reliable. We want people to think we're cool. So I'll end up doing a ton of work the day before just so I can go into that call and say, yeah, I did it. Right. So for me, I find my impact doubles or triples in a given area if that's what I'm getting coached on. So I think it's tremendously important.
Yeah, I talk a lot about the role of coaches and mentors and how that has a massive positive impact, and you're absolutely right. Accountability is so important, and it literally, as you say, even if it is the day before, you do what you say you're going to do. Good. I'm glad we're all on the same page. I think everyone listening, if you don't have a coach or a mentor at the moment, it would be worth at least investigating the area. And what I like about what you said, Derick, is that you use different mentors for different things. So you might have a marketing expert, you might have someone coaching you, you might have someone looking at your real estate or whatever it is, helping you on that. It does matter what stage you're in and what you want to be able to progress in and increase your knowledge of.
I agree 100%. And I would even say, Mark, like you were mentioning that you're getting into real estate. I think on the front end of a business or the front end of a new endeavor or like investment, that kind of thing, that's when a mentor can be most important because you know the least. So you're most vulnerable, most able to make mistakes at that period of time. Just like when you first learn to drive, that first year it's a little sketchy, right? And I see a lot of real estate investors or a lot of business owners who really get tripped up in the first year and get a bad taste in their mouth. One of the first things I tell a lot of my clients who want to get into real estate investing, because I don't do that as my primary thing. I do a little bit with a couple of select clients, but to find a mentor in their local market, somebody who's already doing the thing you want to do, and find a way to make it in their best interest to work with you, right? Because a lot of those guys who are working in real estate, maybe they're not looking to mentor someone. I mean, some are, but a lot of them aren't. But if you can go to them and say, hey, I'll go out, I'll do the legwork, I'll kind of be like a free employee or whatever, I'll find deals and if we can work together on them and I can learn that way. Yeah. Right. And a lot of mentors are very open to that because it costs them very little to get you educated. Yeah. And then when you go out there, you're going to make them money. So they have an incentive to do that. So just aligning your interests can be super powerful. And it's interesting because some mentors, the only way to work with them is you got to pay. And a lot of others, if you can find a way to be valuable to them and build a relationship, they're happy to mentor you in what they're an expert in. Yeah. So we find that a lot because I work with a lot of really successful people who are great at one thing, this thing that they do for their business. And I help them on their personal finances. And then they're willing to mentor me or introduce me to people or whatever because they want to return the favor, right? It's reciprocity.
Yeah, absolutely. Why is the stock market broken? One of your quotes that I found when I was doing reading on you. Why do you think it's broken?
I think the model's broken. Your advisor doesn't make money in the way that our stock market is structured, does not make money based on how well you do. They make money by how much money you have with them. Sure, if it goes up and you do better, chances are you're going to stay with them, and chances are you're going to have more money for them to manage, so they make a little bit more. But like the guys who run these big funds or that people invest with, if the market goes down and crashes, they still make money. They make the same money, right? You lose money. In fact, you lose and you pay their fees. And I feel like it's broken because your interests are not aligned with theirs. Right. And I don't like that at all. I really would prefer that everybody's interests are aligned if you're really working on an ongoing cost basis, which is how most of those things work. The other big thing with the stock market is, and there's been a lot of talk about this, but it's not really correlated to what actually happens anymore. It's a lot of it is speculation. Yeah. Everybody's betting on what they think is going to happen, not what a company's actually performing on, right? Like everybody's trying to be ahead of the curve and guess the next big thing, but that's all speculation. And the big difference between investing and speculation is betting on a future outcome. Investing is based on value that's there today. Yeah. Like this company is producing a predictable profit. That's investing. Or you buy a piece of property that's already worth a certain amount and you're buying it based on that, versus it might go up. I'll pay more than it's worth today because it might go way up. That's speculation. Yeah. And I feel like the market has really turned into speculation. And most of that speculation is not based on value. I mean, it's based on Donald Trump's tweets. It's based on headlines that come out in the paper, none of which actually impact the day-to-day operations of these businesses that are being bought and sold. So I just think there's a lot of disconnects there that are happening.
And this might be a loaded question. I'm not sure how you respond to it. Bitcoin, what's your view on Bitcoin?
I'm really coming around on Bitcoin. I do think crypto in general is still kind of Wild West, right? There's not much regulation. I think Bitcoin can be a place to potentially hold some money, to just as an offset, kind of as a hedge, right? If everything else goes to crap, this might hold its value. Bitcoin, like everything else at this point, is still speculative, because one of my beliefs about investments is you should invest in things that have intrinsic value. So intrinsic value means, like, if it disappeared tomorrow, would people's lives be impacted? Like if houses disappeared tomorrow, we're going to have a real problem. Yeah. If food disappears tomorrow, if Amazon or a business disappears tomorrow, like, people care. If Bitcoin disappears tomorrow, assuming you don't have any money in there, do you care? Not really, right? I could almost say the same thing about gold and silver, which, is like, everybody's like, whoa, don't say that about gold. It's always been the standard. But if you read how gold became the standard, it was just because it was rare enough, it was durable, right? Like, it didn't wear out. It was portable. You could carry it from place to place. It was divisible, and it was mintable, right? You could mint it into coins and you could regulate those coins. And so gold became the standard. If you think about it, like, if gold disappeared from the world, the only people that care are jewelry makers, right? Because it's really great for sticking stuff in, because it's a very moldable stone. But like, if gold disappeared from your life today, Mark, how would that matter?
It would have no impact on me, apart from my wife would want to know where's her next piece of jewelry coming from.
Right. And that's really where gold's value is. But there's no reason, like, at this point, it's something we've been using forever and that's generally accepted, but there's no reason that gold needs to hold value, right? And Bitcoin's in that same boat, in the sense that people believe in it, and that's why it has value. And I do think a digital currency is where we're going. And the nice thing about Bitcoin is it can't be easily manipulated like a government currency or something like that. So I think that's where a lot of people are putting money into Bitcoin as a hedge against inflation, as a hedge against corruption or changes that might be happening in the marketplace. So I think it might have a place, but I think, like anything else, you want to understand why you're doing what you're doing, right? My 3 golden rules with investing is, do you know about it? Do you care about it? And do you control it? If you don't know about it, you're in trouble. If you don't care about it, you won't pay attention. And if you don't control it, you could be at the mercy if the winds change. And so we want to just be aware of that. Bitcoin, I think for a lot of people, doesn't fall into those categories. But if you're really looking for a place to potentially hide some money, store some money, just make sure it doesn't change in value, I think it could be a place to put a little bit of money for people. And there may be some upside there, who knows? But I think it will hold its value through some of the ups and downs that might be coming.
I think also money likes to transfer fast. Like if I'm sending money to you as you've provided a service, if I could transfer money in Bitcoin or through a cryptocurrency, and it didn't take 3 days to go through with some banks, although banks have moved a lot in the last 5 years. But I think that sort of friction sometimes stops money moving, which slows it down. If cryptocurrencies fits that bill, that actually it's easier or faster to transfer money through Bitcoin or through any other cryptocurrency, there might be a value there as well, additionally to it holding as a sort of currency.
Yeah, I think right now I think just to be on par with other transactions, you need to get rid of that friction. So it is right now a little bit of a detriment. And I think like solar powered cars and electric cars are going through that right now, right? Like there's only so many places you can charge them, and it's a little extra work. I think people realize that's where things are going and where we need to go probably as a world at some point. So they're willing to deal with it. And I think the same thing with Bitcoin right now, people are willing to deal with it. But like you said, as it becomes smoother and easier to use, as it becomes more widely accepted, I think that's going to definitely impact it in a positive way. I think the big question with Bitcoin, and I hate to throw this out there, but I won't be the first to say it, is just, is China or is the United States going to come along and just say, well, we'll tell you what, we don't really want Bitcoin. We need to be able to regulate this because of terrorists or whatever excuse they use. We're going to have our own digital currency. You can trade your Bitcoin for this, but as of 6 months from now, you can no longer trade Bitcoin in the US or something. And they can just change the rules and the whole thing's done, right? And that's the one thing that scares me about it, is it's kind of outside of anyone's control, which is really good. But on the flip side, it would have to, they could force it to almost go black market if they really wanted to. And I know China's done that with a ton of stuff, right? They just say, well, you just can't use Facebook. And then someone invents Facebook that they're a part owner in their country. Yeah. So, or Amazon, they have their own version of that. So they just take things that have already existed and they just make their own version of it that the government can have a little bit of control over.
Yeah.
So I don't want to get conspiracy theory, but that's the one thing that scares me about stuff like that, is one government change and they can just wipe the whole thing out.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Could go down that a lot deeper, but let's because where I was going with that is Facebook wanted to set up its own currency. What was it, like 4, 5, 6 more, probably before COVID actually. So it's longer than that. But they had trouble being able to get it as a reputable currency, and therefore it's sort of fallen down, and now it's not being used. So even companies try and pick up these sorts of ideas of currencies, and as you say, if they're not backed by stakeholders like countries or companies, you're going to hit snags, hit problems there.
Yeah, you could potentially, and that's, part of Bitcoin's appeal is that it's not part of the normal system, but that could work against it. I just don't know. It's so early in that whole iteration and it's never been done before. So I just feel like it's speculative. It could be a nice thing, but I would definitely not put my whole portfolio there or something unless you're a Bitcoin expert.
What is harder, wealth creation or keeping your wealth?
I'm going to go with wealth creation only because usually to get to the point where you're keeping your wealth, you have already created it. So you had to learn a lot to get to the point where you have enough wealth to create or to keep. But I think they're both unique and difficult skills to master. It's just in creating wealth in the first place, you've kind of had to master keeping some of it. So yeah, but I think those are both really, really important sides of the coin. If you never make it, you can't keep it. If you make it and you don't understand how it works, it goes away really, really fast. And as a friend of mine who used to coach Lance Armstrong and some of the other Olympic athletes, he said there's a difference between getting to the top and staying at the top.
Yeah.
Once you get to the top, like several things that happen is as you have money in your possession, more opportunities come along. Some of those legitimate, some of those not. There's a lot of things you can take your money and do. And all of a sudden you go from running a business or being a highly paid employee to like learning how to invest your money, right? And learning how to navigate the tax code, which is a really big one for keeping the money that you make. They're totally different skill sets. And I think truly you need a team to help you with that transition, because like the tax code in the US is as thick as the Harry Potter books, right? It's just, it's massive.
UK. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting one because I get your sports analogy. Climbing to the top of the tree is hard, but you've got an aim for. Once you get there to the top of the hill, it's very easy to go downwards, and actually that maintenance of high value is incredibly hard and incredibly difficult to negotiate. And as you said, it's almost like they're two different skills that you have to learn while you're in that wealth creation or wealth keeping stage.
Yeah. And once you get to the top, like there's a ton more distractions. The media wants to talk to you, or investors, or, hey, meet with me about this. And it's like, you can't just focus. Like when you're unknown and on the way up, nobody's distracting you. Nobody's calling you to pitch you their ideas or any of that stuff. The more successful you become, the more people are trying to get to you to distract you, to get you involved in their thing. Right. And so you really have to stay focused, and it's a whole nother thing to add on to just being really good at what you were good at in the first place.
Absolutely. Take a step out again. What books have been most important to your success?
Well, I mentioned Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and that one, I don't think that book's the be all end all, but it really got me started. When I first got into business, a book, some of these are cliche, right? The E-Myth. I don't know if you've read that one by Michael Gerber. I just think being clear between the technician, the manager, and the entrepreneur visionary, super important to be able to distinguish. A book that I really loved was, and this one's not super popular, Seth Godin wrote a book called The Icarus Deception.
Oh, okay. I've read a couple of Seth Godin's, but not that one though.
Nobody talks about that one, but that one really got me. And the couple of nuggets I got out of that is like the gap between you discovering what you want to do with your life and your business and you actually being good at it. Like when you first go into something, you're like, oh, I want to be an artist or a writer or a podcaster or a financial person. Like the gap between you saying, I want to do that, and you being good enough to do work that you think doesn't suck is about 2 years. And just not losing yourself in the gap, just knowing that it's going to take a while to go from what I can appreciate to what I can create. And I'll even say that's kind of what I'm going through. You mentioned earlier, like that you've seen some of my YouTube videos. I know that before I'm good at something, I'm not going to be as good, right? So we started our YouTube channel back in March or April, and now we're doing like 2 videos a week. And I think we're at 41 videos or something at this point. But hopefully they're getting better. But I just know that the gap between me creating the stuff I want to create and me being able to appreciate it, like it's going to take 2 years to get there. So I just have to get on the road. And that's a big part of what we're doing with just creating leverage. So that was a good book for me. One that I've read recently that I really liked is Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Yeah, I haven't read that yet. Yeah.
Yep. My favorite quote from that one is, you don't rise to the level of your willpower. You sink to the level of your systems, right? And we talked about that with automation and systems. Yeah. I love that quote. Totally love it. On the marketing side, I really love the book Expert Secrets by Russell Brunson. I'm a big Simon Sinek fan, so I really loved Start With Why and Leaders Eat Last. the system I was talking about with the banking system, there's a couple of books out there, Heads I Win, Tails You Lose by Patrick Donahoe. He's a guy who's in my space, who's a leader, and he really demystifies how a lot of people think about money and finances and some of the things with the stock market and everything. Really love that book. And then I have a bunch on the spiritual side that are really big for me. I'm a big fan of the Tao Te Ching, the Stephen Mitchell translation, The Gift by Hafiz. Those are two that I've read 100 times that I just totally love.
Awesome. Thank you very much for those books. I'm interested because you've mentioned about 0809 with we called it the credit crunch, and how it impacted your property business. But how do you think this recession in COVID is beyond the obvious about it being health rather than a financial? But how do you think this recession is going to impact US, UK, Europe differently to maybe the 0809 crash?
Well, I think there's a couple of things going on. Quite a few things that are like all happening at the same time. One is COVID's come along and it's kind of been blamed for this, but the truth is we were long overdue for a market correction, right? I think the Trump administration, whether knowingly or not knowingly, extended the slowdown or the pullback that would naturally happen with the big tax changes, right? What essentially happened was they lowered corporate tax rates. So corporations had a bunch of money that normally would have gone to taxes that they had. And I think the idea there was they would reinvest that into their business in research and development, new jobs, that kind of thing. What they actually did, many of them, was they took all that money and they bought their own stock. They did corporate buybacks. So by buying their own stocks, it continued to prop up the market. They didn't have the profit numbers, but there was demand for their stock because they were buying a lot of it over the last 12 to 18 months. And then what happened is as COVID came along, and like the airlines is a perfect example, apparently they did this with the corporate buybacks. And then of course the rug gets pulled out and they don't have any liquidity. All that cash that they should have had has been pumped into buying corporate stocks or corporate buybacks. So we had an overinflation because of that I believe in the stock market value, more than normally would have had because of a tax bump, essentially. Yeah. Then we had a correction that probably should have been happening, but COVID comes along, scares the heck out of everybody speculatively. It crashes. Everybody who's sitting at home says, well, let's take our money and let's invest in the stock market. And they all get their $1,200 stimulus checks and different things here in the US. And a lot of people saw the market crash. I'm getting in. So a lot of people got in, which helped fuel that rise back up. And I think now we're kind of at the point where that rise has flattened out and we're maybe a little bit more in the, there really does need to be value here. And people have run out of some of that extra money. So I think we're in a place where normally I would say since the second quarter, numbers were down in the US, and I'm assuming they were similar in the UK, about 33%, right, over what the economy normally does. Yeah. And so we haven't really seen a ripple effect to that, but there's a lot of people that's been stacking up and adding up. So I suspect that there's going to be a split. They're sometimes calling it a K-shaped recovery, where half of I don't even want to say half, much of the economy is going to go back to normal. And then there's going to be certain sectors that just are totally decimated, right? The restaurants, the travel industry, the hotels and hospitality, those kinds of businesses are just absolutely crushed. So there's going to be 75% of the economy that's fine, or people that are fine, and 30% that are really hurting. I don't know how that shakes out, because there's also, at least here in the US, there's so much more money floating around right now than there was a year ago. In April in the US, a statistic that I heard from a reliable source was more money went into savings accounts in April than has ever gone into savings accounts in an entire year. Wow. So that much money got pumped into the system. Yeah. And as I work with business owners, I have a ton of business owners who have gotten these small business loans, who have gotten payroll protection plan things. They're sitting on hundreds of thousands of dollars. And they're like, I don't know what to do with this money. Like, it was given to me to keep my business afloat. We're doing fine, but I'm just sitting on a couple $100,000. And that's where I can see where inflation might start to come in. People are still a little bit scared, but they're sitting on a ton of cash. So I would normally say real estate would probably start to slow down, but interest rates sunk. So that's going to bolster demand for real estate. And so I think we're going to see for the next 6 months probably some volatility, but I don't think we'll see any major stuff. But I think when the have-nots, the people who are really in the tough spots, when they really run to the end of their rope, we're going to start to see some waves of a lot of demand for low income housing. We're going to probably see some houses actually go to market and be taken back by the banks. So I think for probably 6 months from now, we might really start to see some ripples, but I think there's enough money out there to kind of smooth the surface for a while. So it's a really weird thing because there's all the money would say the economy would go up and all the economic distress would say it would go down. And I don't exactly know how it's going to shake out, except that at some point the bills have got to get paid. Like we got to pay back all that money, and people who don't have jobs have to find an income. Yeah. And I don't know what that looks like.
I've not heard of that explanation of the economy as a K, and I think that's really powerful because, as you say, in the UK, things like hospitality, retail, that shopping has been absolutely decimated. And while we're still we've just kind of gone back into a mini lockdown in the UK again. So we've got a second spike. Yeah. So that's hitting businesses and it's hitting them hard. But like corporate jobs where you're in tax or in financial management, they might have been impacted very early on, but they've recovered and in some cases done even better business. So I think that's a really interesting point about the K, and I think that will still impact business and life for I think you're right, 6 months at least will still be impacted. Really good explanation. Thank you for that. So we're coming to the end of the interview, and I ask the same 6 questions that I ask everybody. So they are quick fire questions, but they don't need a quick fire answer. It's up to you. What's the best piece of advice you've been given?
I think 2 things that I live by. One of them, this was a piece of advice that was kind of a dating piece of advice. When I was in my late 20s, I was talking to my dad and I said, Dad, I've been dating these girls who are like younger and I feel like I'm getting older and I don't really know what to do. And he just said, Derick, if you just focus on being a really good human and doing the right thing, like that part of your life is going to take care of itself. And as a young man, that really took a lot of pressure off me. But I think it applies to a whole lot more than dating. If you're in business and you do the right thing, you take care of your clients, you act with integrity, like everything else sort of seems to take care of itself. It doesn't mean you're not going to make mistakes or have setbacks, but it really makes a big difference. So I think that's probably the biggest one. And then the other thing that I heard recently that's been sticking with me is confidence comes from doing. Like so many things in our life that hold us back, it's just because we haven't done them yet. So if you want to gain confidence in an area, just start doing it. And like I said with the videos, before you're good, you're probably going to be bad. So just get through the bad stage and then you get to be good the rest of your life, right? And so just whenever I'm afraid of something or need to grow my skill set somewhere, I'm just facing it head on. And that's been really big for me.
And I think it's really important. You said this earlier on, and I didn't flag it, but I want to flag it now. To actually be good at something, set up a business, learn a skill, do a podcast, do a YouTube, it does take between 2 and 5 years to actually get very, very, become an expert on a subject. It's like everyone now, we've always thought this, but everyone thinks you can just do it. You just practice 3 times and you'll have a perfect YouTube video. It just doesn't work like that. I'm in my 3rd year of podcasting, and you hear my first podcast, and I do podcast courses now, teach people how to do it. And I always play my first podcast, and it is terrible. I cringe every time I hear it, but it's actually very good for them, and it's actually quite cathartic for me as well, just to see how far I've come. But you've got to just invest and understand that it's a long-term investment, these things. You're not always going to get quick returns.
Well, that's why it's important to do things that matter to you, right? If you're just in it for the quick buck, because I was a purpose coach for a couple of years with that financial company, and if there's going to come a time where it's just not worth the money, right? And so there needs to be a bigger reason to get through the hard times. And so if you're just in it for the dollars, you're going to give up. So don't do that. You need to do something that's worth committing to long term.
Yeah, I agree. What's the best decision that you've made?
I think the best decision I made was to go into business for myself. It's certainly been gut-wrenching up and down, but I feel like I've had a really full life, full of adventures, full of flexibility, full of travels. I've lived in, San Francisco and Los Angeles and Houston and Austin and San Diego and New York City and Washington, D.C., and a little bit of time over in Europe. And just to be able to move around with my life and have the flexibility to do all of that, to be able to pursue things that I love, all of that I attribute to being self-employed and being able to have my own business. So I think that was the biggest thing, maybe the hardest thing, but also the biggest thing. Awesome.
Who helped you most in your career?
My family, definitely. My parents, especially early on with just advice and a little bit of financial help. But also a good friend of mine, Garrett Gunderson. He's the kind of a financial guru here in the US and one of my best friends. And we've worked hand in hand on a lot of things for the last 20 years. And he's just been nothing but generous with me and just a massive impact. Yeah.
Awesome. Do you have any regrets?
Yes, I do. I think my biggest regret is, and this is something I'm still working on just in full transparency, not being a better communicator when things are hard, when times are tough, right? And I feel like I lost a relationship or two in my lifetime that had I been a better communicator and had I been less scared and more transparent and honest and really willing to look that in the face and talk it out, would have been better. And I've lost some valuable relationships. So I'd say those are my biggest regrets, especially in the '08 thing when things were crumbling, a significant other, and some other things with friends and stuff, where if you would have just been straight with them up front, thinking you could get through it and trying to manage it, but not totally being transparent up front really cost me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your honesty. Thank you. What are you most proud of?
I think I'm most proud. This is going to sound funny. I'm really proud of the artwork I do. I'm kind of an artist on the side, but I created some artwork that I really like.
Yes.
And then also, I think I'm just really proud of the fact that I've been able to impact thousands of people's lives. That was something that came through loud and clear when I went back into real estate and just working with houses and not feeling like it didn't matter to me how many houses I flipped. But when I think back through the clients that I've worked with over the years and how many of them have just been so grateful for the help that we've been able to do, I feel like if I passed away today, what I did mattered, and really working with people and creating that proper financial freedom mentally, right, just in their own mindset and confidence, has been really big.
So I also read that is it swing dancing? Is it swing dancing?
I do a type of swing dancing called West Coast swing.
Right. Which is what?
And it's like a contemporary version of swing dancing. So you can dance it to hip hop or EDM or pop music, or we also dance to blues and some oldies and some more traditional music. But I love it because you can do it no matter where you go, you can dance it. Like if you just do salsa dancing, you have to go to a salsa place. Or if you just do the ballroom dances, you have to go to a place where they play this one kind of music. Mm. Swing dancing, West Coast swing specifically, you can dance to probably 75% of the music on the radio. Mm. So it just brings dancing into your whole life. And so I've been doing that 20 years, and obviously not much the last 6 months, but I was competitive the last 5 or 6 years. I did some teaching when I lived in New York City and a little bit in Texas. Really fun. Just a great outlet. I met a ton of awesome people, got to travel all over the world for competitions. And, I wasn't like a professional, but kind of a low-level local professional. And it was fun.
It's interesting. Two things people say are really impactful on your life, your holistic life, not just business, is singing and dancing. Because dancing, it's physically, and you have to remember moves, and you have to use your brain and your legs and your arms, and equally singing also, because a friend of mine does like choral singing and does for particular sort of exhibitions and things, and she said literally just singing with a group of people and the harmony and the collectiveness, as well as the actual practice, which is great for your vocal cords if you're in sales or you're doing anything, are really, really important. And I do neither of those, but I have ambitions to maybe take one up when I finish my corporate career, because I actually see value in both of them. There's a great deal of things that you can learn from people outside of business, and singing and dancing, I think, is important.
Yeah, and I think just having a creative outlet, something that's totally different than your business, because I put a ton of creativity into my business and in the marketing and the different things that we do. But the reality is, like, just doing something totally separate, totally for you, doing things that are social. Like, the thing about swing dancing is, like, I would move to a new city and in 2 weeks I'd have 100 new friends, right? Because you go and you dance with all these people all night, and very quickly you get to know each other because you're in close quarters and there's a degree of trust, and it's fantastic. Like, the quality of life that comes from having so many great people in your life is hard to overstate.
Totally agree. The last question is, what does legacy mean to you?
That's a great question, especially because I don't have kids, right? So to me, legacy is leaving something behind that makes the world a better place. And it just needs to make the world a better place, and something that matters to you. But I think being able to leave something behind that helps improve the world or improves people's lives in a way that you thought was important would be my definition of that.
Brilliant. Thank you. And the last thing is, where can people find you? Where would you like them to find if they want to find more information about you?
Well, if they like this conversation, then probably the YouTube channel. You can just, look up my name on YouTube, or you can go to biglifefinancial.com/YouTube. Also, the banking system we talked about, we have a free gift on our website, a book you can download. If you just go to biglifefinancial.com and just click the Get the Book link, you can download that book. And I write articles on Medium. We have the Business Owner Success Lab on Facebook that we do trainings every single week, and a lot of content. So all those places they're kind of coordinated. We post a lot of the articles and videos in the Facebook group.
Thank you, Derick. Thank you so much for your time. It's been absolutely fascinating speaking to you.
Thanks, Mark.
Cheers.
To make sure millions of people are getting paid on time and in compliance, ADP is staying on top of each new piece of legislation. So when it comes down to it, ADP isn't just a payroll and HR company. We're the company that helps you navigate complexity. Learn more at adp.com.